Greetings to all and welcome to the Seattle Law of One podcast. One of the most puzzling and intriguing aspects of the Law of One is what's been said about space-time, the physical universe as we know it, and time-space, the metaphysical universe beyond our senses. How is space-time different from time-space, and why should we care? Is linear time an illusion? Do past, present, and future actually exist simultaneously? Is time travel possible? Let's find out. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found in the list of study groups at the L&L research page shown on your screen. We do also have a Facebook group, and we do meet on Zoom twice a week, Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, Saturdays 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our Facebook group or our Zoom sessions. Anyone who's interested and available is welcome to join. Just contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com to get on our mailing list. We send out emails once a week to let folks know what we're talking about that week, as well as the Zoom links. We do also have a YouTube channel where we keep recordings of previous podcast episodes, as well as recordings of Q&A sessions with Jim McCarty, Austin Bridges, Gary Bean, and Tricia Bean from the L&L Research Channeling team. Just go to our YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button to get notifications when we upload new videos, and contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com if you'd like to join in on any of our Q&A sessions. Otherwise, as mentioned, our topic for today is space-time and time-space. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists. Panelists, would you let our viewers know who you are and where you're calling from, starting with Andy?
Hi, I'm Andy, calling from Southwest England, Cornwall, and thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you very much for being here. Always enjoy hanging out with you, Andy. And Anthony?
Hey, I'm Anthony. I am based here in Camas, Washington, and I'm happy to be here too as well.
And we're super happy to have you here, Anthony. Always a joy hanging out with you. And Aram?
Hi, I'm Aram, and I'm zooming in from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm really happy to be here.
So happy to be with you, Aram, too. Three of my favorite third density entities, I gotta say. Do you want to say before we start that none of us here are experts or authorities on the Law of One? We are just normal people hanging out, talking about how space-time and time-space work. Like normal people, you know. Anything we say could be wrong. You're welcome to disagree with anything or everything that any of us say. If you are already familiar with the Law of One and the entity known as Quo, you might want to skip ahead to the chapter on space-time and time-space. Otherwise, for those who are new to the Law of One, you can think of the Law of One as a set of spiritual teachings based on the understanding that all is one and that one thing is love. Pretty much everything else we're going to be reading about related to the Law of One could be considered some variation of that statement. It is worth noting that all of the reading passages we're looking at today came to us through the process known as channeling. You can think of channeling as a form of telepathic communication between humans and entities such as angelic beings, extraterrestrial beings, spirits of deceased, higher self, interplanes entities, etc. A channel serves as a mouthpiece for other entities to speak through, and in this case, those entities would appear to be of extraterrestrial origin. There are two types of channeling that have been done by our friends at L&L Research. Trance channeling is when the channel is in a trance state, meaning they are subconscious or unconscious as if asleep. They are not aware of what is being said any more than someone who talks in their sleep is aware of what they're saying. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Ra back in the early 1980s. Conscious channeling is when the channel is in a conscious but deep meditative state, meaning they are somewhat aware of what is being said, but no more than someone who's just half awake and half asleep. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Quo, beginning in the mid-1980s, all the way up to the present day. So who is Quo? You can think of Quo as a group entity made up of three social memory complexes: Ra at 6th density, Latui at 5th density, Hatan at 4th density. You can think of a social memory complex as a planetary consciousness, as if the entire human population of Earth was merged into one single consciousness. You can think of densities as different levels of consciousness or different levels of reality. Imagine that the elements of earth Air, fire, and water actually have some form of consciousness, as many indigenous cultures would say they do, and you could consider that first density. You can think of second density as the level of consciousness of plants and animals, clearly a quantum leap above the level of consciousness of earth, air, fire, and water. You can think of third density as the level of consciousness of humans and cetaceans like whales and dolphins. Again, a significant quantum leap above the consciousness of other animals or plants. You can think of fourth density as the level of consciousness of social memory complexes, the consciousness of all of humanity merged into one consciousness. Again, a quantum leap above the level of consciousness of one individual human. You can think of fifth density as the level of consciousness of whatever would be a comparable quantum leap above fourth density, and sixth density, a quantum leap above whatever the heck fifth density is. So suffice it to say, as far as we know, Quo is a group entity made up of three social memory complexes or planetary consciousnesses: Ra at sixth density, Latui at fifth density, Haton at fourth density. First contact was made by the LNL research channeling team in 1986, almost 2 years after the end of the Ra contact in 1984. They have been channeled every month since then, up to the present day by the LNL research channeling team. Transcripts of those sessions can be found in the LNL Conscious Channeling Library. So let's take a look at a passage related to space-time and time-space. On February 28th, 2009, the entity known as Quo was recorded as saying, "In one way of looking at or experiencing the fabric of consciousness, the mismatch between space and time favors space. Because of this mismatch, there is a periodicity to this fabric of consciousness, as if a pointillist were painting a canvas and were creating dots that, when looked at, becomes a field of color. In the space-time universe, or the universe of ST, the mismatch favors space. There is created an illusion in which space was a field and time was a river. In the metaphysical universe, which is the reciprocal of the physical universe, the mismatching of time and space favors time. And so consequently, in this metaphysical universe, time is the field and space is the river." Really is worth remembering that this came to us through the process of channeling, and the person who was saying these words had no idea what they were talking about or what it was going to look like in the end. They were in a deep meditative state and saying the words that they believe were coming to them through telepathic contact with what they believed to be a extraterrestrial entity millions of years ahead of us in spiritual evolution. And it seems like that, because I don't know any normal person who talks like this. And it really does seem to be advanced. And I am just utterly amazed by this visual, this metaphor of field and stream. If I'm understanding it correctly, what they're saying is that in space-time, like our physical universe, you can move in space, but not in time. You're basically locked into what we would call linear time. But they're saying in time-space, or the metaphysical universe, beyond our senses, it's the other way around. You're kind of locked into space, but you can move around in time. It would be as if wherever you're sitting right now in this moment, you can't move from there in space, but you can move anywhere you want, forwards or backwards in time. That's super amazing to me. Andy, did you have any thoughts, reflections on anything in this passage?
Yeah, so many, but I will only share my limited point of view on a narrow subject. I love this subject. It's one of my favorites. And yeah, I think the implication is that like we're being propelled across what appears to be linear time, but in actuality, like there isn't really time as we understand it in the linear sense. I think what we have are snapshots that are joined together because with our consciousness, and it's the consciousness flowing across these snapshots that give us the illusion of a continuity. So I gave you a picture of a bunch of dots. Yeah, so imagine if these dots, each of these dots were like a snapshot of time. So each moment is just a snapshot. Like this moment now is different from this moment now, but it's joined together by our consciousness. And imagine we're here to go across the page, and that's the time we're being propelled across the page during our incarnations. And this will join the dots, and it's our consciousness and our level of awareness and our vibrations that determine which dots we join up next and the experience that we have. So I believe that like every possibility is already out there, dormant, and it's our service to the creator to bring consciousness to each possible reality in order that the creator can know itself and experience itself. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah, I think so. As much as any of this stuff can make sense to anybody, I think. Did you want to talk about the life paths that I think you had a visual aid for?
Yes, so there's the life path visual aid. So this is something that has appeared on my newsfeed several times before. So these are sort of the life paths, and imagine this is the line that joins the dots. So we can't go back in time because we've missed the dots that we've missed, but we still have a choice of how we want to go forward due to our consciousness. And I suppose that would be a kind of manifestation, you know, which dot do we want to join up with next?
Right. Right. So the implication being that you have any number of possible pasts as well as possible futures.
Yes. And so when you come out of time, if you work in the metaphysical, you're actually coming above the page where the dots are, for instance, and then you can move back to any dot that you want, whether it's the past or the future, because at that point then you're kind of stuck in space, but time is sort of freer and you can move because you're actually above the page where the dots are. Does that make sense?
Another dimension. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
basically.
So, yeah. And appreciate the visual aids. I hope Anthony and Aram, I'm sure you guys brought visual aids too, right? No, it's really fascinating, and I always learn from everybody who's here. So, yeah, Anthony, did you have any thoughts on the field and stream passage?
Yeah, absolutely. I have two thoughts. First, on kind of the reciprocal nature of things. So we have what we experience right now, which is space/time, meaning that right now, if I want to get up and walk across the room, I don't have really anything stopping me from doing that except for my skill level at my ability to move. And what I mean by that is in primitive times, we only had walking our feet. And as we have become more advanced in our understanding of this density, we have planes and cars and spaceships, and we can move more effectively through space. And the same is reciprocal for time-space. In time-space, time is what they can get up and move through without any problem. And space is something that takes more skill and more effort and more experience within that density to move through. So an entity in time-space, as you mentioned earlier, Jonathan, may have difficulty moving through space if it's its first, experience in it. But as an individual such as Ra and them have experienced and developed over time, they now have the ability to move as a rocket ship does in third density, but they can move through that in time space. So that's the first analogy I want to give you. And then kind of unpacking what Andy said and kind of giving it, I love the analogy and it's spot on. To give maybe a more practical perspective on it, I take the same concept and apply it to a video game. So if we take it back to when CD-ROM, when you had a video game on a disc, and within that disc, if we play like a first-person shooter game, the amount of possibilities are close to infinite within the framework of the game, meaning I can look up, I can look down, I can shoot left, I can shoot right. I have pretty much ultimate free will within this construct. Now, when I take the disc out and I hold the disc up, every single possibility that can be experienced within that game is imprinted on that disk and is accessible right now. The concept of time, all the time that exists on that game is right now in the disk as I hold it. And then when I place it into the console consciousness, right, then I can then interact with this experience, right? The soul or the mind body spirit, whatever, the higher portion of me can interact with this experience through this console or this controlling. And so now the game is spinning and playing and all the possibilities are there. And I'm kind of, as Andy shows with that line, I'm kind of maneuvering through these possibilities as I go through the game. And then with the other time space aspect of this analogy is programmer level. Now, if I'm able to play the game long enough or interested enough in video games, period, I may become a programmer of the game. And then as I'm playing the game, maybe now I work at the company. As I'm playing the game, I may also then pause the game, realize there's something wrong in it, go into the back end of the coding, go into time space, where then I would alter and change things around, come back into space time, continue playing the game. And that would be considered an adept or someone who is highly enlightened, someone that can see the game for what it is, understand the ability to program it and kind of alter it. Those are my 2 little points that I just want to season in there.
Yeah, great food for thought. I've always thought of the archetypical mind as being kind of like the programming for this particular logos. And if you understand how the programming works, then certainly seems to help you be able to progress through the game, as it were, much faster. Aram, anything to add on this passage?
Yeah, I have a similar analogy that Anthony's, but it's more low tech. I remember from the 80s there were these choose your own adventure books where you get to a page and then you are given an option, left or right, or go to this page or that page.
Right.
And so I imagine in the metaphysical, all those possible scenarios exist at the same time. And, it's our free will that decides which page you're going to go to. And all those possibilities exist simultaneously. And luckily, I think that in the physical, we still have access to the metaphysical space. And that's what Anthony was talking about as an adept, through meditation, through presence, you can actually use and focus your awareness to jump from page to page, essentially.
Nice. So that graphic on the screen sort of illustrates that as well, all the possible choices you could make in the choose your own adventure book, as it were. Yeah, it's fascinating. And we could easily spend the whole 2 hours just unpacking this particular passage. But yeah, I do want to take a closer look at some of the things that we've talked about already. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to add about that passage before we change topics and look at something else?
I do have a question, and I wanted to know what you guys think, right? So here in space-time, we're propelled across time. So we're moving across time, whether we like it or not. In time space, is it the same? Is Ra or the Quo entities, are they being propelled across space in the manner of speaking, or are they just static and stuck in the one space all the time? What do you think? I mean, what I'm thinking of particularly was when Carla nearly got pulled into negative space-time, and they said she would have been stuck there for millennia. Whereas Ra could go back to wherever Jim was and Carla was anytime they wanted to do the channelings. And yet, if you think about it, where they were wasn't static, because the Earth was rotating, the solar system was moving and the galaxy was moving across the universe. They weren't stuck in the one space, but through projection, Ra could keep going back even though they weren't in a static space. But yeah.
It's a great question, and I have no idea what the answer is. I mean, you're talking about fourth, fifth, sixth density entities that are literally millions, hundreds of millions of years ahead of us in spiritual evolution. The only thing I can think of that helps a little bit is I believe they have said that they are in our inner planes as opposed to outer planes. Inner planes, I think, being comparable to time space, which means, yeah, they are definitely more fluid in their ability to move through time, perhaps more so than space. I have no idea. You have any idea, Anthony, Aram?
Um, I would say that time is a lot more plastic than we give it credit for when we describe it. Me personally, there's times when I may be driving home and my mind is wandering, and then boom, I'm at home, and the amount of time that passes by seems like moments. There are times where I'm dealing with reading a very difficult technical piece of material, and every word seems like 1,000 hours, and just getting through it takes forever. So as Quantum says, the illusion is the illusion is the illusion. So to assume that time has a steady flow, I think it's more relative. And if it's more relative for us, and knowing that it's a reciprocal process, I think space would be more relative for them. Kind of back to another analogy where as we um, as we have these different experiences, such as meditation, and are these tough experiences where time seems plastic, I'm pretty sure they have situations where as they move through different densities of space, that they experience different what's the word, resistance as they move through those particular, time space vortices that they experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and my understanding is also that as you go up in densities from fourth to fifth to sixth, you are in less and less of what they call a chemical body and more of a light body or energy body, which I would think is less bound to space time than these chemical bodies we're stuck with in this illusion. Did you have anything to add, Aram? Any thoughts on this? It's really good question, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, it boggles my mind to think of the metaphysical space. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's about as far as I think we can go on that. Let's go ahead and take a look at some passages on physical versus metaphysical universe. On March 19th, 2000, Quo is recorded as saying, each of you as a physical entity and part of the physical universe is a human being with goals and interests, habits and preferences. The world seems to do unto you rather than you unto it. In the metaphysical universe, the same situation takes on an entirely different cast. Rather than things in the world having weight, it is the thoughts and the intentions, the desires and intensifying effects, and the blockages of energy and relaxing or limiting effects of catalyst that bear weight. Super interesting, and certainly for folks who are not real familiar with the word metaphysics or what it means, at least this is what it means in this context. And yeah, I find it fascinating to consider that the space-time physical universe that we live in, it's really matter that matters, the stuff that we can hold in our hands and seems to have mass and weight. And they're saying in the metaphysical universe, which is just as real as the physical universe, it's the opposite. It's our thoughts and intentions that actually matter as much as matter seems to matter to us in space-time. I find that super fascinating. Anthony, any thoughts on this passage?
Well, one thing I wanted to kind of point out when you sent me this to kind of read is that I think we don't realize how much we actually experience time space. Dreaming is an aspect of that. As they talk about the ability to create one's reality, if you ever had a lucid dream, that's time space. Your thoughts have more weight than the actual reality in which you're moving through, and you actually have the ability to interact and control and do all kinds of different things. And so we actually experience time space every time we go to sleep. And so this brings up my first little not what I'm saying, what's the pop culture
Pop
analogy,
culture.
right? So if you guys ever seen the movie Soul, right? If you
Yeah,
guys seen Soul,
great.
there's a part where there are these helpers that even as they're conscious, like the guy spinning the sign, he's actually in time, space, or the astral, right? Doing this type of work. And I just recently read, it wasn't a quote in here, but I was reading on my own. Quote was talking about the difference between the outer planes and the inner planes. And he mentioned that the inner planes are within you. That we think of these inner planes like Stranger Things. Like, we got to go to this other part of the geographical location. We got to find this portal in the ceiling, and then we got to open it up. We got to crawl through it, and now we're in the upside down. And this upside down area, it would be the inner planes, and it's like someplace outside of us that we have to then open. And but the inner planes is within us, and we can tap within that through our own, through meditation, through our own dreaming. All right. And so when Quell and them say that they're within the interplanes, they're actually within these deeper levels of our own consciousness, right? As we learn about the tree, the tree, which is our mind, the trunk, archetypical mind, and going deeper. And then lastly, I had something I was going to circle in on that, but we'll go ahead and pause there. I'll let Aram go in there with something poignant there.
Yeah, I appreciate that last part that you mentioned, because it reminds me, Quo has said more than a couple of times that you can think of us as just existing in the mind of the channel, and we'd be happy with that. You don't have to think of us as being extraterrestrial or something outside of yourself. If you think in universal terms and we're all one mind anyway, then yeah, in that sense, we're all in the inner mind, inner planes. Aram, anything to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna agree with Anthony because I know I've had some dreams that feel more real than this reality. They're like hyper real. And just like you said, I remember having dreams early on where I could levitate. And those dreams felt so much more like the reality than waking up, and I'd be bummed when I'd wake up. And in those dreams, I could literally just with my thought, raise myself, through the air. It was like there was no physicality to the flying. It was just through thought that I would move up or down. And I guess that gives me a little bit of insight into what the metaphysical portion might be like, where literally, going back to that, the last passage where I think the bias is towards thought and intention.
Right.
You can literally just manifest something through your thinking or your consciousness versus
Right.
something physical in matter in the physical realm. So yeah, I just feel like the possibilities are so overwhelmingly limitless in the metaphysical that I can't even begin to imagine. But yeah, I was gonna say, because we are all connected, it's this damn veil in third density that keeps us from realizing that we are all one, and that we all share the same consciousness, and that we are all connected. And yeah, just excited to know that, through the work of an adept, you can see pinholes through the veil every now and again.
Yeah, and based on my understanding of channeling transcripts, as humanity adapts more to fourth density light, fourth density vibrations, there will be that thinning of the veil, and there will be more of what we think of now as manifesting thoughts into reality, something I think we can expect to see more of in the not that distant future. Andy, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a good time to bring in the Tesseract, actually. We've been talking about that. Yeah, because it's sort of for me, it's about correspondence, the Hermetic principles, as within, so without. And so having the thoughts and the intentions, basically for me, what that means is that what is inside is reflected in what's outside of us, and what's outside of us is reflected, is a reflection of what's inside. And really, when we talk about, say, free will, the only thing we really have to choose is where to place our consciousness. And by doing that, then the reality on the outside kind of reflects that. Can I share the video? Do you have the video of the Tesseract?
Oh, I didn't think we were going to be
Okay.
talking
Yeah,
about that
no, yeah,
today.
yeah. That's one a really good way of illustrating it. Perhaps we can post this later in the links. Because it kind of shows that you've got this shape inside another shape, but then it goes on infinitely, and what happens in one part actually infinitely affects everything else as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, beautiful thing. Anything I know about Tesseracts, I think I got from Avengers movies, the MCU. I don't know. Anthony, do you have any thoughts on Tesseracts and how that relates to this passage or what we're talking about?
Not in a way that I feel that I can bring any value at the moment.
Yeah, it's good stuff, though. Appreciate bringing it up. Aram, did you have anything to add before we take a look at another passage?
No.
Does anybody have anything they wanted to add on this passage before we look at something else? Nice. I did want to let our viewers know that I'm trying to keep these episodes to 1 to 2 hours, but they usually end up being close to 2 hours, so don't feel like you have to watch the whole thing from beginning to end. You can always put it in your watch later list, and when you come back to it, it'll pick up wherever you left off. And it's why we divide these episodes into chapters, so you can skip around wherever you want. You don't have to watch the whole thing from beginning to end. Otherwise, I would like to take a look at some passages on inner versus outer planes. On October 8th, 2006, Quo is recorded as saying, "The term inner planes is misleading in that the inner planes are planes in time-space, or the metaphysical world, as opposed to space-time, such as your planet is with solid rock and water and so forth. Therefore, the inner planes do not have a physical location except tangentially because they belong to planet Earth. This instrument calls them inner planes because she has read other writings that also call them inner planes, and also because they are inside you." Something that we talked about a little bit already, but I've always been fascinated by this idea of inner planes and outer planes, and makes me think of astral planes and Doctor Strange movies and all that cool stuff there. But I think it's just helpful to kind of see the correlation that outer planes, at least in the context of what Quo and other entities have said in these channeling sessions, that outer planes is basically the physical universe, which is basically space-time. Inner planes refers to the metaphysical universe that we cannot see, or basically time-space. And as they said, Quo appears to be in the inner planes. Aram, you have any thoughts on this passage to share?
Yeah, I really like this passage mostly because to access the outer planes, so to speak, you really have to go inward. So through silence and meditation, quieting the chatter of your mind and getting really deep within yourself to really connect to the part of you that is connected to the outer planes, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, anything to add?
I love that, Aram. That's so beautiful. Yeah. I think within each of us is the entire universe. And again, if you look at the video of the Tesseract, it makes sense, and we're all Tesseracts in a sense and all joined up. And I just want to share an experience I had about 25 years ago where I accidentally, by chance, during meditation, encountered what I call the God particle. It's the size of a pinprick, and it rests very deep within the heart chakra. And when I encountered that, I was like, oh my God, it's the universe, and the universe is trying to talk to me. And it was just the most amazing, blissful experience. And then I got distracted. I'm like, okay, universe, what do you want to say to me? And the universe said, shh. So, and for the last 25 years, I'd been like trying to establish a perpetual connection and awareness of it. And I've been working on it. And only in like last month, I've managed to get there. And so it's now saying something new to me, after 25 years of only saying shh. It's now saying, do you see me in this? So everywhere I look, like even like I could look at a cup or a brick wall or even dog poo, and it say to me, do you see me in this? And again, it's that correspondence, the inside and the outside reflect each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they've used the term holographic universe, both in physics and in the law of one, to illustrate how all is one and that every part of the creation, from the largest scale down to the smallest iota subatomic scale, each part contains the whole within it. So everything on the inner planes is going to be a reflection, or everything on the outer planes will be a reflection of what's on inner planes, and vice versa, I guess. Anthony, anything to add?
Well, yeah, a couple of different things. So, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier and kind of wrapping up about the whole soul thing and it being inside of you. When I was younger, I used to have a very vivid imagination. I used to commit, and actually, when I was reading this, I even kind of did a little bit of it myself to kind of see if what I'm about to say to you guys is still true. And it is, I kind of got a little lightsaber out in my hand and pulled it out and had like a little sword fight. And I'm a grown adult and I actually was really committed to it. And in my mind, there's really no difference, right? If you really commit to these types of things, and also in magic, we lean into that. And what I kind of was trying to experiment with and trying to convey here is that is time space, right? Because time space is an analog of space time. And so when we were kids, we're really tapping into this aspect of reality, right? But it's the best way to say it, with our adult minds, with our linear way of thinking, we have to have space/time and time/space, and we have to have all these units of measurements and have ways to kind of define this infinite plane of kind of a fractile, just kind of moving and blooming, and all these different aspects of it are all fluid and motion. And it's hard for us to look at that disc of the game and play the game by just looking at the disc. And so I guess I'm saying all to say that it is all one. And the purpose of us incarnating into this body is the same purpose of the Xbox, to play the game. And the game is to know is to know ourselves better. And the bigger game is for the creator to know itself better through us. And so I guess I'm trying to say all this is to say that we experience more of time space than we actually give ourselves credit for. And this particular topic is something that we know more intimately, and it's much more simplistic than all of the meaning that we're putting to it. And I think if we just step back a little bit and kind of look at it as dreaming, or look at it as the imagination, or look at it as a deep meditation, and I think we realize that we interact with time space equally as much as we interact with space time.
For
And
sure.
maybe it can help it be a little more comfortable for all of us to realize.
For sure. I think that would be a really good takeaway lesson for people to take away from this, that yes, we interact in time space a lot more than we think, and dreams, I think, would be a good example. I think for a lot of people, it's just hard to accept that there is more to the universe than the physical universe. I think probably it would be fair to say that most people just assume that the material universe of atoms and molecules and rocks and water is pretty much all there is. But if you start taking a look at quantum physics, and we're going to have an episode on quantum physics in the not too distant future, yeah, quantum physicists have concluded that matter is derived from consciousness. When you look at the universe on the smallest scale, they see consciousness. They see that the universe is really more of a thought than a machine. And that definitely ties into the whole idea of time-space. Did anybody have any other thoughts on this before we take a look at circular time?
Yeah, it's something that occurred to me when you were making your spiel about the skipping ahead on the videos or going back. And, the way
I think I know where you're going with this.
the way I conceive of, the entire universe, it's almost you know, like YouTube, everything, imagine every life as a video that you've uploaded to this giant repository, and that includes, every incarnation, every thought, and it's like when you can go inward, that's the search bar, so to speak, and where you can, find any video and then like pinpoint using focusing your awareness in that vast library and pinpointing, which portion you want to view or look at or experience. So
Indeed. I think that is another implication of the holographic universe, at least from, I think there was a book about the holographic universe suggesting that, yeah, the entire universe as we know it really is a hologram, kind of an illusion that allows you to do all those things that you talked about in terms of skipping around forward, backward, and time and so on. Heady stuff, to be sure. I definitely should have gotten high before this episode. It definitely would have helped. As is, I'm just drinking water today, so I'm just, yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts on anything before we change topics? Sounds good. So let's take a look at circular time. On December 6th, 2003, the entity known as Quo is recorded as saying, "The one known as Jesus had an awareness that the time was short, that same awareness that you may see again and again whenever entities of great inspiration and purity have come to grips with the deeper tides of time and space. In the sense of actual time, 2,000 years does not seem to be a short time. Gazed at across the expanse of a cycle of time, which is perhaps 75,000 years long, the last 2,000 years, the cycle of Pisces, indeed would seem a short time, especially because the one known as Jesus had, to some extent, developed the ability to work with what this instrument calls circular time, and so was aware both of linear time and that level of consensual reality that all here share, and also of the underlying reality of the inner planes, in which the end times, as this instrument is used to calling them, had already begun. Things occur within the inner planes long before they begin to appear in the physical plane. The roots of physical experience are often figured as a tree which grows in heaven and whose branches only reach the earth, so that things have already occurred in the root of the tree and in the trunk of the tree of destiny long before they appear as leaf and blossom upon the branches of consensus reality or physical life." Super interesting passage. I have gone back and read and reread this passages many times to try to figure it all out. And I think it is just fascinating that what they're saying about this entity, Jesus, or Yehoshua, as he's known in time, space, and metaphysical planes. Yeah, I was able to see both linear time as well as circular time, so that when he did what he did, when he came to this planet as a way shower to show people the way to fourth density, he did it 2,000 years before the end of this master cycle, because in his way of looking at things, the end times had already begun, as is suggested by the idea of past, present, and future existing simultaneously. So I think that's fascinating, as well as everything in the third paragraph that kind of goes back to what I think Anthony was saying about branches and roots of a tree and such. What do you think, Andy? Any thoughts on anything from this passage?
Yeah, in fact, I've been thinking about it since I read it when you sent us these passages a few days ago, and it sort of explains to me a lot about why I find a lot of people, spiritual seekers, carry about them this sense of urgency and this awareness that every moment is precious, and you know that they're kind of willing to sacrifice material things and are not as bothered about, you know, accumulating wealth, and are much more focused on, you know, making the most out of every single moment and the preciousness of the moment. Because I think there's this awareness that in a sense, you know, there is no time, but at the same time, time and the moment is all we have. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Which gets back to present moment, which I think we're going to be looking at before too long. Anthony, anything to add?
Yeah. So speaking personally, how I look at this concept of circular time is kind of two ways. You know, first kind of looking at it from the sense of the graduation, in the sense that we have these 25,000 years that we cycle through. At the end of these 25,000 year cycles, graduation takes place, and then we go into fourth density, and there's these cycles of evolution that we go through. And as we spiral up into each particular lesson, we then evolve closer to the creator. For me, recently in my own personal life, having had, I should say, how this has expressed itself in my own personal life is, you know, recently, as I've gotten some deeper understanding about some of the material, I felt like I was on this kind of spiritual high for several months. And I was very focused and was very balanced. And I was sharing this stuff with you guys too as well. And little did I know there was a little bit of chink in my armor. There was an expectation of my behavior in a way of having an effect on the ones in my family and expecting to see them also have this kind of spiritual change. And when that did not happen, things kind of fell apart, seemingly. And this is what I mean by the spiral. And what really I equate it to is what that spiritual high was. That was 8th grade graduation. I had gone through this middle school and I was at the top of the school. I had understand everything that I need to know for middle school. And so now it was time to graduate. And so over the summer, I was high, I was feeling good. I was sharing all these experiences with you guys. And then freshman year started. And all of that knowledge of 8th grade that put me at this superior level, I felt like I had this understanding, now is up against what a 12th grader knows and what I need to then now know. This is a new cycle of growth, right? First, I cycled through middle school, now I'm cycling through freshman, through high school. So what I look at as an 8th grader compared to a freshman, now I feel small. This growth that I thought that I had seems like I did not grow at all. In actuality, I'm actually bigger than that 8th grader was. Even in a small belittled state, all that knowledge is still there. And I think that's what they're talking about. As we spiral through, we'll go through these stages of illumination, or better yet, what Carlos says, we go through these phases where we walk the rims of the valley and we see these huge, you know, open spaces, right? But most of our time is walked in faith in the bottom of the valley, where it's cold and wet and rainy and the sun doesn't necessarily get through. And it's only the times when we're on the railing times, those are not times for us to learn. Those are times that sustain us through the times that are harsh. And it's only the faith to know that these times actually exist. And so I kind of put that all together to say that time is not necessarily in the main aspect. Eckhart Tolle says, if you went to a planet where they had no time and you asked the animals there what time it is, they look at you like, what are you talking about? What time? It's now, brother. Like, what do you mean? And so with that being stated, really, it's just about spiraling through these phases of growth. As we learn and understand, and we build an understanding of how to love in that moment, that love is then, that ability to love in those moments is then intensified. Maybe not through the other action, but through our sensitivity and awareness of this need to love, as Andy said, this desire to seek. And so now our sensitivity is higher. And so the thing that our spouse or our child does yesterday, when we had the 8th grade awareness and we were able to go, oh, that's no problem. Now we're in freshman year, they do the same thing and it cripples us. It's not because we are unaware or we're less adept, that we're more sensitive and we're more in an attempt to purify, even at a deeper level, those things. So then when we get to that 12th grade, it's not a conscious thing, it's a reactionary thing. 3 times 3 is 9. I know it is. I don't have to think anymore. I knew the answer in 8th grade, but I had to think. I'm in 12th grade and it's there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people can relate what you're talking about because everyone goes through their own spiraling growth cycle, and we're all trying to learn lessons of love in our own way, in our own place. And I think the image that came to my mind as I was listening to what you're saying a few minutes ago, I think, was about why Quoa has said so many times that before you begin work in the upper energy centers, like the indigo ray, where all the cool, fun stuff happens, you got to make sure that you do the work in the lower energy centers, the red ray and the orange ray and the yellow ray, and make sure that you do have good, strong, loving relationships with your family or individuals or with the other groups of people that you work with. Otherwise, yeah, if you don't have a strong foundation, it's really hard to do work in the upper levels. So I think that's a great reminder for all of us. Aram, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like, one of the big paradoxes of a spiritual seeker is that knowing that you are eternal, there's an essential nature that never dies and, has will always be, has always been. And then there's a Ram in this lifetime. And so, the part that identifies with the physical matter and the body, you know, is aware of how precious time is and how, their time is limited and there's going to be an end at some point. But the larger Aram knows that there is no end, and that if I want to, maybe get a glimpse of future events or, things that I've planned pre-incarnatively for myself, that's when I have to access the present moment, which is where you have access to eternity, basically.
Indeed. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing a little bit of a deeper dive into that particular subject. Before we do that, I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about what was said in the third paragraph, that things occur within the inner planes long before they begin to appear within the physical plane. The roots of physical existence are often figured to a tree that grows in heaven, whose branches only reach the earth, so that things have already occurred in the root of the tree and in the trunk of the tree of destiny long before they appear as leaf and blossom upon the branches of consensus reality or physical life. They do seem to be talking about, the physical universe and the metaphysical universe. To me, I think the image that comes to mind is unconscious or subconscious mind compared to conscious mind. The idea that your conscious thoughts are like, the leaves in the tree, but usually your conscious thoughts really began long before that in the roots of your subconscious mind and your unconscious mind. And I think that's a really important thing, I think, maybe to understand if people are having difficulties in their everyday life, to examine their conscious thoughts and take a look at the programming, as it were, that where those came from in the subconscious mind, the thought patterns and such that were ingrained to us, starting when we were children, that can trigger us when we're adults. Learning how to dig a little bit deeper into the roots and find those triggers and maybe dismantle those triggers in order to reprogram the biocomputer, as they might say, or change your conscious thought patterns. That's what comes to my mind. Anybody, panelists, any order, have any thoughts on that, Anthony?
Yeah, quick thought experiment to kind of test that out, right? So I'm going to say a word and do your best not to have any emotional trigger or any type of feeling towards the word. Just look at it objectively. And I'm curious to how quickly emotions arise within you. You guys ready? 1, 2, 3. President Trump.
Who?
Were you...
Never heard of
it. So if we take an objective look at that, and I'm not asking anyone to tell us what you feel about the individual, it's just a very polarizing individual. It's very hard for you to catch where in your mind the concept that you have of that individual and the word. It's so already there. What does it say? Things occur within the inner planes. The idea of this person appeared so deep within your mind before it even bubbled to the level of consciousness. And that's the same here. All the things that are going to take place on the planet are a result of the inner workings of all of us collectively. And so as we think of these things collectively, and not just for this lifetime, but over many lifetimes, and if we really get deep, over Maldekian and Martian lifetimes, right? And all of the other lifetimes that are added to the planet, we come up with a very kaleidoscope of different opportunities and things that can take place. And they're all have residence deep in our past. Just like as the word president came about, your brain was already formulating an idea of what that could possibly be and what is a president, how that is. And then the word came out, you're thinking, oh, on a subconscious level, if you're going to say Trump, and all these different emotions come about of what you think of it. And before you know, you may have tried to block it a little bit, but it's only through great practice do we able to even have awareness of the lower levels of consciousness in which these things pop up and above. But what happens below here is so hard to be aware of.
Right. Yeah, so much of it is tied to previous memories and experiences we might have had of, let's say this entity when he was president the first time back in 2016 and such. And I'm really glad you brought up the pre-incarnative thing too, because I think it's true. So many of what we see as biases, shall we say, in this incarnation are really carryovers from previous incarnations as well. So really appreciate the reminder on that. Andy or Ram, did you have any thoughts on this stuff?
Yeah, I love that thought experiment, Anthony. Thank you. It's fantastic, and it also makes me think of the idea of dependent origin. You know, the Buddhist idea that your thoughts originate from your previous thoughts. But hypothetically, what if everything in the past doesn't exist and it's just been implanted and none of it was real, and each moment
We have no way of
is like
knowing.
that. Pardon?
We would have no way of knowing.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that was really fun. I enjoyed that. But yeah, things occur within the inner planes long before they begin to appear within the physical planes. Like I use the analogy of like a cake, right? Before the cake was the cake, it was an idea in someone's head. Before a baby was a baby, it was an idea of, somebody conceiving. So, yeah.
Yeah, good examples. Yeah, absolutely. Ram, did you have anything to add? Any thoughts to add?
Yeah, it's just weird thinking about how every future possibility exists already now, and that's you know that's why we're given free will, is like we get to make the choice, and I love this, the consensus reality. It's not that we're just doing it as individuals, we're doing it collectively. We're co-creating a future. So, you know, we have that power and that choice. And it speaks to how much influence each one of us has on the future. The choices that we make are not just for ourselves. It can ripple. So even a small thing that you do, I used to feel very disempowered about politics, but like now I realize like even a small act of service in my own community has enormous ripples for the future.
That is a really, really beautiful, powerful thing for all of our viewers to appreciate, I think. Let's take a look at another passage about circular time. This is actually from the Ra Contact in session 70, question 12. Ra said, "In time-space, which is precisely as much of yourself as is space-time, all times are simultaneous, just as in your geography, your cities and villages are all functioning, bustling, and alive with entities going about their business at once. so it is in time-space with the self. I think that is really just super fascinating. And I love the illustration of the geography of your cities, because if I'm understanding correctly, they're saying that in space-time, time is fluid and moves around, but the space part remains constant. It's all there. Everything, all the things, objects that you're seeing in space now are all existing simultaneously. Whereas in time space, it's the other way around. Past, present, and future moments all exist at the same time, just as all the physical objects in your view right now exist at the same time. And I find that super fascinating. I mean, it kind of makes me wonder about everything that we've said so far about possible pasts and possible futures. It brings up the question of whether the future can affect the past as much as the past can affect the future. If decisions made now affect the future, and what happens in the future decisions can ripple backwards in time to the past and present. I think that's just super cool. Anthony, any thoughts on this?
The movie Interstellar.
Yeah, great one.
That's what comes to mind when I think of this. And if you remember the part where he is in time space and he is stuck behind the bookshelf.
Right.
And going back to the analogy before, he's not as evolved as the fifth density beings that had brought him there. So when I was talking about earlier, here in our reality, we can move much quicker. Please hopefully my son's not coming through on the microphone. We're here in 2025, much more advanced in 1800s, and so therefore we can move through space because of our evolvement much quicker and more effectively. And so in Interstellar, he was not evolved to move within that area. He's actually being assisted by a higher dimensional being, so he's stuck behind that bookshelf. However, he can move anywhere throughout that timeline. He can go all the way back to the very beginning when his daughter was there. He can go all the way back to the very end. It did not matter where in time he wanted to go. And everywhere he looked was a different time-space vortice in which he could then explore, but only within that space. And I think that kind of speaks to a little bit of the fluid, or not the fluidness, but how there's kind of a reciprocal in a sense of how you are stuck within time here, unless you through meditation, adeptness, are able to kind of have a little bit of fluidity with that, right? The zone when basketball players and athletes are able to get into that zone and they can just slow the time down and do those types of things, right?
That's a great example.
That takes a level of skill, and not a matter of the actual experience of the reality. And I think that's the same for the reciprocal. As we become more evolved in the higher realms, our ability to, move about that space that we found limited is really just a matter of skill.
Yeah, great examples. Appreciate it. And yeah, it goes way back to the beginning of our field and stream passage, I think. Aram, anything to add?
No, not now. I'll wait.
Sounds good. Andy?
I think Anthony articulated that so well. I don't want to ruin it by adding anything to it. But having said that, it reminds me, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Red Dwarf. It's a science fiction. It's meant to be a comedy, but there's an episode of
But it's British, so
it is British, yeah. There's an episode where they were like they got stuck in this kind of vortex where they were going backwards, they're traveling through time but backwards. And then one of them had to go to the toilet. I'm just going to leave it there to your imagination.
Oh, goodness, that's interesting.
But yeah, it's like the picture with the dots. It's like everything exists all at once, and if you remove yourself, you can go anywhere, really. But yeah.
Indeed. Well, thank you for planting that visual in our minds. Gonna reflect on that for a while. Yeah, well, as long as we're talking about pop culture, the discussion about circular time, to me, certainly brings up the movie Arrival. If folks watching this have not seen it yet, it's a really great movie. I think many would agree it's one of the best movies about extraterrestrial contact. And it's a beautiful story about a woman who is a linguistics professor who's recruited by the military to try to figure out how to communicate with these extraterrestrial beings who just kind of mysteriously appeared in 12 different countries. And their language is circular, like you can see on the screen, because they operate in circular time and see past, present, and future happening all at the same time. And rather than traveling through space to get to Earth, it would appear that they traveled through time. I'm not going to spoil it any more than that, but just suffice it to say it's a great movie. Highly recommend. Otherwise, how about let's talk a little bit about time travel. On February 28th, 2009, Quo is recorded as saying, "When entities speak of time travel, they speak in everyday 3D terms of a science fiction and impossibility. However, in the time-space or metaphysical universe, it is the only way to travel, shall we say, for it is the field and space is that which flows. The inner planes of your illusion are within time-space. Your thoughts, before they reach the conscious word-making process, are in time-space. Consciousness, that ground of being which creates a unity of the universe, manifests in time-space. Consequently, if we speak of space-time, we are speaking of the everyday waking reality illusion of third density planet Earth. When the term time-space is used, it indicates or refers to the metaphysical universe." Just want to remind again, since haven't said this in a while, that this stuff came to us through the process of channeling. I don't know any normal person who talks like this. I was a philosophy major and I've been studying this stuff more or less every day for the last 40 years. I've never seen any writings or communications like this anywhere else. It really is a fascinating thing that these words came from someone speaking who really didn't know what they were saying. They were just saying the words one at a time or a sentence at a time as they came to them. So when you put them all together like this, yeah, it is a really fascinating thing to contemplate. And certainly with the idea of time travel. Again, I think I like the part where they're saying how their thoughts before they reach the conscious word-making process are in time-space. Kind of goes back to that other discussion we were having about how everything in your conscious mind really starts in your subconscious mind. Everything in the outer planes begins in the inner planes. Aram, any thoughts on anything in this passage?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just is kind of reiterating what we've talked about before, where time is simultaneous, like everything exists now. I'm going back to Anthony's video game analogy. You know, we think this is the reality, but really there's a greater reality where we're just the avatar in the game. And, you know, we're yeah, the more I think of this just as like one gameplay, you know, I can focus more on yeah, that this everything that I do is if I do it with the connection to a higher self, then I'm sorry, I'm getting lost in my thoughts right now.
Are you lost in time space?
Yes, I'm in a vortex right now. Sorry. Let me
It happens with this stuff. It is really
yes, I
heavy
know
stuff.
it's really sometimes it gets confusing. Can you come back to me actually
Yeah,
after I've gathered my thoughts? Sorry.
you bet. Yeah, and I want to reassure our viewers again that, you know, all four of us here are just normal people and we're trying to figure this shit out just like everybody else. And yeah, it is really hard. A lot of this is really hard to wrap your head around. So hope you will forgive us if any of us are stumbling at times. Andy, did you have any thoughts to add?
No, it seems pretty straightforward, but I just want to sort of mention, I think a lot of people get confused by Quo and Ra's language because they say things like teach, learn, teach, space, time, space, and it's confusing. But if you just read the first word and ignore the second, it does help to make it make more sense. So instead of saying time space, if you just say time, and ignore the second part and think about that maybe a bit later, it will make the sentences flow a lot more easily and make the text easier to understand. So that's just like a side note, basically.
That's a great idea. I had never thought of that. Appreciate your sharing that. Anthony, any thoughts to add on this passage?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is my meat and potatoes. And as you mentioned, Jonathan, you should have smoked before. Me, I just stay high the whole time. That way I can just
Yeah, indeed. It's kind of
rocking
my
that.
baseline consciousness level these days.
Exactly. What I want to share with you is actually a quote from Ra on 1622. Don had asked, it said pretty much, and I'll paraphrase Don's question. It asked, is there actually no past or future or present? Would this be a good analogy? And Ra said, there is a past, present, and future in third density. In an overview, such as an entity may have removed from space-time continuum. It may be seen in the cycle of completion, there exists only the present. We ourselves seek to learn this understanding. At the seventh level or dimension, we shall, if our humble efforts are sufficient, become one with all, thus have no memory, no identity, no past or future, but exist in the all. I always thought that was interesting, and I tried my best to search it before we got on the call. What they're saying is that, from my interpretation of it, is because of third density and choice, we have this thing called past, present, and future. But when we look at it in an overview, when we look at it from the ending of this cycling, this octave, right, we actually do see it as all one present moment. And what Ron and them saying is we are still, and this is something that always tripped me out, is that they said that we are still trying to exist just in the present moment. At sixth density, they're still trying their best to be present in that moment. And they say, we ourselves seek to learn this understanding. They seek to learn the ability to stay completely present. And they say that they will only reach that in the higher dimensions when the idea of memory, the idea of identity is all last. And then at that point, they are in with the all. So I just kind of wanted to point that out, is as we're trying to understand this stuff at this level in third density, or even our teachers at sixth density are like, guys, I'm not even present all the time. And I'm still trying to understand how to get this stuff done,
Right. Yeah. And as you said, I mean, they're millions of years ahead of us already in spiritual evolution, and they're still trying to figure it out. So not sure what the implication is for us here in third density. But it does remind me, they have said many times, Quo has said many times, usually at the end of a channeling session, that they're really inspired by us and that they learn from us as much as we learn from them. Probably because we have taken that leap into incarnation and third density behind the veil of forgetting. So everything we're doing blind. We're taking a closed note test. They're taking open book tests. They already see all the answers.
I'll switch some spots anytime. Anytime they want to switch out, they come down. They can do
yeah,
exactly. I'll
exactly.
do the quote
Yeah.
thing. I won't. No problem. No problem.
Exactly. Someday shall be reunited with your social memory complex. Aram, did you have anything wanted to add at this point?
Yeah, I do. And I think the glitch I had earlier was a perfect example of what happens when your mind starts to wander and lose focus and cannot stay in the present moment. And I experience that all the time where, when there's like a flow state where you are present and things are kind of just you're not they're more spontaneous and you're not like so careful and thinking ahead, or your mind's not distracted, and the words can just flow freely. And I there it's a struggle to stay present. It's very difficult to not think about the to-do list in your head, or something that you did in the past that you're like kicking yourself for. It really requires that connection to the present moment, is how you access your higher self. And that's the part of you that is maybe the creator that is flowing through you versus the smaller self.
Well said. Yeah, indeed. Much appreciate it. How about let's take a look at another passage related to time travel. This was from June 1st, 1986. This is from the Confederation entity known as Lalima, and this has been edited for brevity. And Lalima is recorded as saying, "Indeed, without reverting to the heart of the meaning of time-space, the mechanics of time-space are relatively simple. You call one of your planet's journeys about the sun a year, and you number them after that which is thought to be the birth of a master teacher, Jesus. Your year 1929 would be as Cincinnati to Louisville, the year 600 BC perhaps equaling Australia or Madagascar. It is the mismatching of space-time which gives to you, your space-time physical bodies, the experience of moving through an incarnation. You will notice that in space-time, it is time upon which one focuses, although it is space within which one moves. In mismatching of time and space, so that time is predominant, it is space which is noticeable and important, and time which is moved about in carelessly and taken for granted. Thus, the physical space-time trip to Cincinnati would be as miraculous to a time-space entity as time travel is to you who have asked this question. It is the simplicity of the concept that tends to confuse the mind rather than its complexity." I think that goes back to something that Andy, I think it was saying just a few minutes ago, that it really is simple. We just kind of tend to make it more complex than it has to be. But I love the analogy of traveling to Cincinnati or Louisville. That would be a shorter distance in time, whereas going to Australia or Madagascar, that would be just a longer trip in time. But that traveling in space to them would be as miraculous as traveling in time is to us. I just think that's fascinating. Well said, Lalima, wherever you are. Andy, any thoughts on anything from this passage?
Um, no, I think it's pretty straightforward, but I'm curious about how physical space travel across space would be miraculous, because wouldn't they already have experienced it? I mean, they're not under the veil, right? So they should have some sort of memory of the experience.
I think it's just the nature of space-time and time-space, to go back to the field and stream analogy. I think the way it works is that in space-time, where, we think of physical space, we can move around in space very easily, but we're pretty much locked into time. In space-time, we don't really have the ability to travel in time unless, as Anthony said, you're an adept or you have some extra unusual abilities. And I think they're saying the reverse is true in time-space. In time-space, you can move around wherever you want in time, but you're kind of locked into space the same way we're locked into time and space-time. Does that make sense? Does that?
Yeah. So,
Question?
but like, why would it be miraculous though? But I think, yeah. And also, like, Ra managed to go back to the same kind of space, the house where the channeling was taking place, and yet they weren't actually in the same space each time. Within a 24-hour period, it would have rotated and moved across space. But they could move to a different space and follow that location that was actually moving.
Well, I suppose because they were in the inner planes, which is more independent of physical geographical location. They were in the channel's mind, for lack of a better word. So I don't know if that's how I see it. It's a good question. Did you have any thoughts on that, Anthony, or anything else to add from this passage?
Well, I would just say that, for example, we experience movement and time and all these different things, and we only experience them through, as in Buddhism, our five aggregates: through our eyes, through our mouth, through our ears, and through our senses. And these things are filtered through our mind. And science has told us that if we had enough, time, I guess, and enough sophistication, we could take the human brain out, we could wire it up to a computer, and if we had enough sophistication, we could send it this exact same electrical signals, they theorize it, and that brain sitting in that little vial of water would not know the difference between, me right now walking through and the experiences that I feel, the electrical signals that I'm giving it, and the electrical signals that this computer is simulating to it. And so I'm tying this all in because Ra said that we're just dancing thoughts. So at the end of the day, we are all thoughts. So when we think about like how the earth rotates and we had to place it here and time and all these different things, these are all concepts in consciousness. And there really is no distance and there really is no time. There really is just unity, right? And going back to what I was saying before, those who have been able to understand the game and become programmers of the game then can start moving in the background of it, which is the time space, and interacting with that. Because from my understanding, as long as we have incarnated bodies, right, and we do in fourth and we do in fifth and we do in sixth, even though they're lighter and less chemical, that means there's a time space that they interact with. And as you read through the material, you realize that when Latwi or L/Lima is speaking with us, they're actually in some type of meditation, and they're actually in time space, but they do have actual physical bodies that they do enliven and move about within their higher densities, right? And so the point that I'm trying to make here is that, as Lima says, we overcomplicate this very simplistic thing called unity. And another thought experiment I would give to you is the answer for us to all of the questions we have here, and it's so simple, is love. And it's so hard, even though the answer is single. My wife's yelling at me, she slaps me in the face. What do? You love her. Well, the person cuts me off in traffic and they freaking damage my car. What do? You love them. Well, when someone cuts me and hurts me, you love them. And your brain's like, what the freak, man? How can it all be love? But it's just love. Love. It's so simple, it baffles the mind. And we try to complicate it and reason with it. Well, this person did this thing to me, so I should do this to them. And that's how I want to show and express what I consider love. And now we just complicated this concept of love. And it's the same thing with time space. We live in unity. There's nothing more to it than our own thoughts and our own way that we identify with these thoughts. In a moment, if all of us truly believed that we could do something major, we would do it because we believe we could.
Yeah. Yeah, I really so appreciate your bringing us back to session 1 of the Raw Contact. One of the first things they said in their first contact was, you are dancing thoughts in a ballroom that has no material. I think that is such a profound statement that really makes sense out of everything, and how thought is timeless. If you can travel at the speed of thought, you can go from one end of the universe to the other end faster than light. It's instantaneous. And yeah, I really appreciate putting it in that context. Aram, anything to add?
No, you basically just said what I was thinking, which I think proves that we're all telepathic. But basically, yeah, in the metaphysical, you can travel at the speed of thought.
Yeah, isn't that something? Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and move on and talk about something that we have already mentioned a few times, and that is the present moment. On January 14th, 1996, Quo is recorded as saying, "When we say open to the present moment, we speak of that present moment which is eternal. Within time, the attempt to grasp the present moment is constantly doomed to failure, for your mind, that is your earthly intelligence, and the illusion itself were created so that things would occur in an order. In the eternal present moment, all things exist simultaneously. That which is, and in this fullness of being resides the peace that is so eagerly sought by those who weary of the passing scene. How can one find this present moment? We suggest often the practice of regular contemplation or meditation, for within silence there is that key which unlocks the doors of attention, and into that sanctum sanctorum of the open heart, silent and listening, there resides the Creator, whose name is love." I've always been fascinated by the present moment. This is something that I've thought about and reflected on for many, many years. And I think the present moment perhaps could be thought of as the smallest unit of time, as it were, and that everything after the present is in the future, meaning it's unreal, and everything before the present is in the past, which is unreal, which is why they're saying anytime you attempt to grasp the present moments, it's doomed to failure, because as soon as you think of the present, it's already in the past. So there's something about that smallest unit of time, which apparently contains infinity and eternal and all things existing simultaneously. There's something very magical and beautiful about that, for sure. Anthony, any thoughts on present moment or this passage?
Yep, I got three, and I wrote them down so I can be concise and kind of fit them on there. First one is The New Earth with Will Smith. Have you guys seen this movie?
Heard of it, haven't seen it.
Real quick, there's an aspect of it where these aliens are attacking these humans, right? And they can sense fear and they can smell it upon you, and that's what they're programmed to do. And Will Smith is one of the only few humans that has ever done what's called ghosting, where he is so present in the moment that there is no fear and they can't see him. And what I mean by that is we get so caught up in the past and the future that we these concepts are not real. And so, for example, the alien is coming and they show the hand moving in slow motion. And in reality, if we look at it strictly objectively, if someone's throwing a fist at me, there should not be any fear. You should be observing of this item coming near me. It's getting closer to my face. I need to either move my face out of the way or I need to receive the punch. In reality, what do? We put all this emphasis into the future. Oh my God, he's going to punch me. Oh no, it's going to hurt. All this pain's going to be there and I'm going to be knocked out. And all this fear comes out and we can't respond. And in this movie, they were able to achieve that and beat the aliens. Also, too, second point, Eckhart Tolle, I learned presence from reading this book. And since it's not channeling, I'll just point out real quick. Eckhart Tolle, when reading the book, challenged me and said, have you ever been to this place called the past? Right? In actuality, the past is just these chemical reactions that take place in our mind that emulate an experience we had. And so therefore we have an idea of the past, but how do we know, as we talked about before, that there ever was a past, right? Beyond our own memory. And if we look at the concept of the future, if we are able to ever, first of all, go to it, we've never been there. If we are at the very close, we can make predictions. And everyone knows, even the best statistic person, even the greatest psychic can't get every detail right. And therefore, when we do experience this idea of future, when do we experience it? In the present moment. And so therefore, there is nothing else beyond that particular thing. And I'll end on that. I'll leave those 2 points and let you guys marinate on those 2 things.
Yeah, plenty of food for thought there. Appreciate it. And yeah, definitely interested in the Will Smith movie. That sounds fascinating. I forgot, there was actually a second passage that I meant to read at the same time as this one. So if you don't mind, I'm going to throw that in there here. This was from November 5th, 1989. And Quo said, "The present moment is infinity. It is as though one were at the intersection of time and eternity at each present moment. The difficulties people experience are due to living the horizontal life without being aware of the resonances of the vertical life, which is moving infinitely within one at all times." We'll come back to you on that one, Anthony, if you have thoughts on this passage. Otherwise, Aram, any thoughts on this passage or the other one?
Yeah, I have thoughts on this passage. I think about how, when people who do, improv comedy or play jazz, it's like there is this field of consciousness where everything already exists. And when they are in the moment, it's like they can tap into that potential and it just flows right through them. They're not consciously thinking about their next move or like what note they're going to play. They're just allowing that flow, that connection to the universe just arise spontaneously.
What great examples. Yeah, I love that. Reminds me of freestyle rappers who can speak stream of consciousness and rhymes with, I assume they're not memorizing it. I assume they're just speaking the words as they come to them at a super fast speed. Andy, anything to add on this passage or the other one?
Yeah, so much, but I will keep it brief-ish. Yeah, I think the present moment is fascinating because if we pay attention to the present moment and we think, and we meditate on it, we think of time in terms of events, but if you're at the present moment and you're fully immersed in it, there are no events. There is objects, and objects are material events, I suppose, like a rock is actually an event that arose, when the earth was created, and it will die at some time. And, and when you're in that space, that present space, you're in the timeless time which holds the events, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's what Anthony was describing a few minutes ago, I believe.
Yeah. And it's the same with space. When you become aware of just being the space that holds the objects, you're actually at the intersection between time and space. So if I believe I've got a slide for you, Jonathan. Yeah, so like, let's say the x-axis is space and the y-axis is time. This is and the point is to remain in the middle, right? And for me, this reminds me of the crucifix as well, and the heart center. If we sort of spread out our arms and stand straight and still, we will find, or my experience of what I call the God particle is smack in the middle, and that centeredness, and in a way, our language gives us lots of little clues into how to be in that present moment in which the God and the I am resides.
Indeed. Yeah, I think this reminds me of something that Anthony was saying a while back, which is that we're always in space-time and time-space at the same time. We just don't really realize it. And I think they have, maybe not in this session, but in other sessions, also use the XY axis to suggest that the x-axis or the horizontal life is kind of what they would refer to as space-time. What we think of as the normal physical universe, and the y-axis, the vertical axis, represents time-space, or the metaphysical universe that is beyond our senses. And that if you can imagine yourself like moving along that x-axis from left to right, the y-axis moves right along with you, so that we are always at that intersection of space-time and time-space, which is a beautiful, magical, powerful thing, I think, to realize and to be conscious of in your waking life. Anthony, did you have anything to add on this passage or anything else?
Yeah, the third thing I want to say, and I think this is a good time to talk about it too, is like, how do we access the present moment? And one thing for me that came to terms and realizes that we have the key with us all the time is our body. Believe it or not, since your body has been in the womb, it's been present. And it always is present. Your body's not worried about the past or the future. As a matter of fact, in meditation, one of the things when I used to do instructions back before the whole COVID thing, one of the things you would instruct people to do is to focus on their hand and the sensation of their hand. Because we know our hands so well, but to do that, it takes to be in the present moment. Or if you find that difficult and you really want to experience the present moment, and I challenge you guys, if you've never done this, take a cold shower and try to think about anything else in that freaking cold water and your body and that very moment. You could be depressed, you could be sad, you could be angry, you can be happy. You try to take I'm talking about ice cold shower, and your body will let you know how present you truly are.
Indeed.
Oh, last thing, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Great movie about this type of thing. I don't know why I didn't bring it up sooner, but I wrote it down. The ability for her to be in all these different actors, all these different timelines, all that happened at once. And the only way to solve it all is through love. I'm telling you, that's a great movie.
It is a great movie. Thank you for that and all the other pop culture references. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Does anybody else have anything to add on this subject before we take a look at our last passage on our last topic? If not, let's talk a little bit about a phrase that has been used more than a few times by a quo, and that is citizens of eternity. On September 26, 1999, the entity known as Quo was recorded as saying, "When entities such as yourselves commit themselves to living a life of service and seek it, they are working as citizens of eternity rather than citizens of space and time. For the world of the seeker who has become consciously aware of the desire to seek further, and who is consciously attempting to live such a life, the terrain shifts from the world of physical objects and activities to a world of thoughts, ideas, and intentions. These two worlds merge within the seeker, for the seeker is living in two worlds at the same time. The seeker is living in a very physical consensus reality in which consensus reality rules apply. And in that world, it would seem obviously better to feed 1,000 people than to feed one, to heal 1,000 people than to heal one, to console 1,000 people than to console one. Within the world of spirit, it is not at all obvious that it is better to heal 1,000 than to heal one. It is not at all obvious that spending time upon one's development as a person is selfish. In fact, to the contrary, in the world of metaphysical existence, time spent upon developing the gifts and skills of the spirit can be clearly seen to be service to others' work of the highest order. Really love this passage, and it just radiates and it sparkles with so many gems of love and wisdom. And it's like a gem that's multifaceted, can look at it in so many different ways and see so many different beautiful ways that the light shines through it. Certainly the part in the first paragraph where they talk about the seeker living in two worlds at the same time, I think goes back to what we were just saying about how you are always at every moment of your existence at that intersection of space-time and time-space, and that everything that you do is not just happening in the material world, but your thoughts and your intentions actually matter just as much as matter seems to matter in space-time. And I just find that super inspirational, especially when they break it down in the second paragraph and they say that, yeah, in the consensus reality, it would seem obvious that healing 1,000 people is better than healing one. But in time-space, no, that's not at all obvious. And they've used the term democracy of spirit many times to suggest that in the metaphysical universe, all acts of service are equal, and healing one person is kind of equivalent to healing 1,000 people, much depending on the intents and the thoughts and everything involved. I think that's just super beautiful and super inspiring, especially to anyone who feels powerless in the world and feels like they can't make a difference, that they are victims of circumstance. I think this is a very empowering passage. Any thoughts on this, Aram? Anything here?
Yeah, I love this passage. It gave me a lot of hope. I, I I see it as like, well, if we are all connected, if we are all one, then serving one person means ultimately you're serving all. And it makes me think of I think all of us are parents. Like, if we can parent with presence and love, that's that's more than enough. That's, and I also think about kind of parenting our own inner childs and giving ourselves that presence and love so that, we can be of greater service, basically.
For sure. Yeah, I love that part at the very end where they're saying that doing the inner work is actually working on yourself, is actually service to others of the highest order. And yeah, I have found that to be true. It's taken me years to figure out, but I did finally realize that the best way to change the outer world really is to change the inner world, and to do that inner work of healing your triggers and traumas and all the things that cause you to be unloving in the outer sense. If you can heal that stuff inside, boy, that really does change the outer world in ways that are perhaps beyond one's ability to understand. Andy, anything to add on this?
It's so beautiful. I don't want to ruin it by adding anything to it, but I will.
But you should. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're British. Yeah.
Yes. Um, yeah, I just want to bring up the video of the Tesseract, which you're going to put in the link again. And if you look at the video, you'll see that it just goes on forever and ever and ever. But each of us is a Tesseract and a part of a greater Tesseract. And if you put one thing in just yourself, that will change everything as well. And if you see the video, you kind of get what I mean, maybe. I don't know.
It's a great visual, and yes, it definitely helps understand something that is really difficult to visualize otherwise. Anthony, anything to add?
Yeah, definitely. And if y'all have stayed with us this long, please do my sister a favor and watch the Tesseract video. She feels strongly that it's going to give you guys some value. I tease you, Andy, I tease you. I want to provide an equation for you guys to kind of help illustrate this, that something that was shared with me, I kind of adapted it a little bit. So let's take all of the pain and suffering in the world, and let's give it a value of X, okay? And let's give the person who does not work on themselves a value or a unit of 1. So the X plus 1 equals suffering of the world, right? But imagine if you do the work on yourself. Therefore, you give yourself a 0. Let's do the equation. X plus 0 equals all the suffering in the world. You see? And I can control that variable much easier than I can control 1,000 different variables. You see? And so I can lessen and have a truly measurable impact, if we want to measure it, on the world by simply focusing on making sure the amount that I add to X is less than 1, right?
Nice.
And then if we keep the principles of unity, then, as Ross says, if we help one, have we not helped all?
Indeed. Yeah, beautiful, powerful message, I think, especially for anyone who feels like powerless and that so much of what's happening in the country, in the world, in politics or whatever is out of our control. At least if you realize that it is in fact out of your control, then it frees you up to do the work inside and to look deeper within for the bigger questions, for the answers to the bigger questions about the universe. And I think that's something we can all help each other in. So appreciate you bringing that.
Real quick,
You have something to add?
a question that you can add to that too as well is that true? That's something that everyone should adopt. The world is messed up and it's crazy. Is that true? Is this really true?
Talk about
Well, it's something that I learned. I forget where I learned it from, because we so quickly, going back to the thought experiment, we so quickly have the idea of what Trump is. But is that true? Or are we simply playing default to the emotions and the feelings that arise in our mind? In order for us to truly evolve and to get to a level where we can really start to get into those graduational realms, we must question everything. And we must be able to understand that our perceptions are muddied by so much things that happened so long ago, that to assume that we have any level of clarity is, for me, a long time was a stumbling block. I think because I can vibrate my lungs and throat with these fancy words, that somehow I have some intelligence behind that. And that idea of intelligence gives me this sense of arrogance that the way I perceive the world is how it is. And it wasn't until I started really questioning, is that true? My wife is yelling at me, she must hate me. Is that true? Jonathan's smiling all the time, he's a lovely person. Is that true?
No.
No, I'm playing. But I'm just saying, it's really good to kind of tease it away, because what you start to see is that, as Quo says, the illusion is the illusion is the illusion. And what truly is true is not necessarily the experiences that happen outside of us, but what we tell ourselves about, or more importantly, the story we tell ourselves about the experiences that we perceive. Is that true? Is it true?
That's a great way to look at it. Much appreciate your bringing it up. And I think it reminds me of what's been said many times, which is that you cannot control what happens outside of you, but you can control how you respond to it. And it's true. A lot of things that might on the outside seem unacceptable and terrible could in fact be the exact circumstances that unlock abilities and opportunities to serve that you never would have been able to do had it not been for those circumstances that seem unacceptable. So appreciate your sharing that. I'm paraphrasing a passage from Quo that I just read on that the other day. Not sharing it here, but it'll be in the episode on control and acceptance, I believe. Panelists, do you have any last thoughts on this before we wrap things up and take a look at where we go from here?
Yeah, I just want to add on to what Anthony was saying. I think what he's illustrating is that we have the power of choice. So, we're all given free will, and we have the ability to choose our thoughts.
For sure. For sure. And that we have all the choice in the world and all the control we need in. Appreciate that. So where do we go from here? What are some takeaway lessons you might want to remember from these 2 hours of conversation we've had? For starters, if you can remember that space-time refers to the physical universe, or what's called the outer planes, and time-space refers to the metaphysical, non-physical universe, or what's known as the inner planes. Those are just vocabulary words that are used quite a bit in channeling sessions that would probably be helpful to remember. And that the phrase circular time means that linear time as we experience it, moving from past to present to future, is probably an illusion, and that past, present, and future do indeed exist all at once, at least in time-space, if not space-time. And that, yes, you live in space-time and time-space every moment of your existence at that intersection of the X and Y axis, at the intersection of space-time and time-space, and that the present moment is eternal, contains eternity and infinity. And that in time-space, thoughts and intentions matter as much as matter does in space-time. Those are 5 takeaway lessons I thought of. Panelists, any takeaway lessons of your own that you want to add, or last thoughts, reflections before we have a pop quiz? Andy, any takeaway lessons of your own or last thoughts, reflections?
Just thank you. I always learn so much from all of you, in these podcasts, and I'm going to have to let it all incubate for a while.
Indeed. Good stuff for meditation. And I learn from you guys every time. Really love this. Anthony, anything want to add?
I would just say, like as Ross says, that we are the messengers of simplicity and not complexity. And that is important for us to understand that although these things are interesting and poignant, they're not needed for spiritual growth. These are fun conversations, and these are definitely very poignant topics. I even have a quote, but I'm not going to read about it, but Ross says this very thing. But the most important thing is not necessarily can you figure out all these different scientifical aspects and all the different, ways and ins and outs of the universe, or, whether you can become very successful with this type of things. All those things are trivial. The most important thing is, can you love to the end of the day? Can you love continuously to the end of the day? And then if you can, all these other things, they're fun and they're miraculous, and they add, flavor and kind of glitter to the day. But at the end of the day, only thing we need to be worried about is, can I love Jonathan? Can I love Andy? Can I love Aram? All the way through the day, no matter if they're yelling at me, no matter if they're nice to me, can I stay solid in this love? That is the only truth.
So well said. Yeah. It's like we said at the beginning of the podcast, that everything that we've said is really some variation, that all is one, and that one thing is love. And it all comes down to love, as he said. Thank you so much. Aram, any takeaway lessons of your own you want to add, or last thoughts, reflections before we pop quiz?
Yeah, the only thing I want to say is I love you all. And I had a lot of fun. And yeah, I love these discussions. And as much as, I get mired in the thinking, I always try to bring it back to the heart, and how, that's that's the answer, really, is love.
I do believe so, indeed. Well, it's been so awesome. I've learned so much from you, as we always do. You guys are the best panel that we've had yet. And I know I say that to every panel, but this time I really mean it. You guys are awesome. So that means it is indeed time for a pop quiz. Pop quiz, of course, is something we like to do at the end of our episodes, just to kind of end on a fun, light note and maybe add a little bit of pop culture knowledge to our Law of One discussions that you can drop into future conversations with normal people when you have to hang out with them. Since today's episode was about space, time, and time space, it seems only fitting that we should have a pop quiz on great movies about time travel. So panelists, I'm going to ask you 3 multiple choice questions about 3 popular movies that had time travel as a central plot point. See how many you can get correct. Those of you watching this on video, you can say your answers out loud. We can hear you through the screen. Your first question is about the first Star Trek movie that featured just the Next Generation cast. And the plot point centered on the Borg going back in time to prevent humanity from making first contact with extraterrestrial civilizations, leading to the formation of the Federation of Planets. You guys know what movie I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do.
You can just say the name.
It's a Star Trek movie. I forget the name. I know the movie. Oh, that's the quiz question. I'm supposed to tell you the name?
No, I'm just trying to see if you can guess the movie that I'm going to ask you the question.
Is that First Contact? Is it like First
It
Contact?
was indeed Star Trek First Contact. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a great movie, and it features the Borg, who are one of the scariest villains you can think of in at least the Star Trek franchise, and going back in time to prevent humanity from making first contact. But as you may or may not know, that was not the original title for the script. What was the original title of Star Trek First Contact? Was it A, Star Trek Renaissance, B, Star Trek Reformation, or C, Star Trek Revolution? Panelists, you can just say your answers out loud.
B?
I'm guessing B.
B, Reformation. Aram?
I will go with A, Renaissance.
Nice. Are you just guessing?
Yeah, it's just a guess.
Good guess. Yeah, Star Trek Renaissance was the first thing. Apparently, the producers and the writers were kind of hooked on the idea of the Borg and time travel from the beginning, but they originally planned to have them go back to the Middle Ages, and they were going to have it take place in the Renaissance period, and the Borg were going to maintain their collective in a castle dungeon, and from these headquarters, they were going to disrupt humanity's exploration and scientific discovery. When they first brainstormed ideas, there were like sword fights involved, and they were going to have Data become Leonardo da Vinci's apprentice. And at some point, they realized things were getting a little bit campier than they really wanted. So they decided to move the time frame ahead to 2063, when Zephram Cochrane would usher in the age of warp drive. It's also worth noting that Patrick Stewart said he really didn't want to wear tights, which I think is really understandable. I think it would be really hard to take that movie seriously if he was wearing tights. Did you guys see that movie? Anybody see this one? Really good one. It is one of my favorite of the Star Trek.
One of my favorites too.
Yeah, I thought it was really, really well done. Yeah. I like how the idea of the Borg is really kind of like a social memory complex, a negative social memory complex, I guess, where resistance is futile. And of course, your consciousness is assimilated into the collective. They are just a scary version of that, I suppose. Are you ready for your next question? Your second movie stars Will Smith in the third installment of a franchise where he plays a member of a secret government agency that monitors extraterrestrial activity on Earth. Do you know what movie I'm referring to?
Men in Black.
Men in Black.
Yes, indeed. Men in Black 3. Yeah, indeed. Did you guys see this one?
Yep.
This might have been my favorite of all the Men in Black movies. I just thought it was really, really great, really funny, really well done, and some really touching, heartfelt moments in there too at the end, if you haven't seen it yet. But your question on this one is, in Men in Black 3, released in 2012, Agent J, or Will Smith, travels back in time from the year 2012 To what year? Was it A, 1967, B, 1968, or C, 1969? What do you think?
1969.
See,
See?
All in agreement on that one?
yeah.
Nice. Yeah, anything for a 69, I'm sure. Yeah.
You beat me to the joke. You beat me to the joke.
As you said, great minds think alike, and we're all still in middle school, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, they chose 1969 because that was the year of the Apollo mission that
Yep.
landed on the moon, and that was a central point of the thing. Which, of course, brings up the question, are any of you old enough? Were you alive in 19... You guys weren't even alive in 1969, were you?
I was born 74, so yeah, 5 years late. But my husband was born 69.
Hmm.
But yeah, this film has one of my favorite all-time favorite characters, and it's Griffin. Did you
Love
remember that
Griffin.
character who could see into every
Oh,
possibility?
yes. Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Is this the future where so-and-so does such and such, or is it the one where...
Yeah.
such?
Yeah, that character is just, I don't know, for some reason I find him deeply moving. He was the last of his kind and so humble and accepting, of, yeah.
Yeah, the actor who played that character really played him beautifully. Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, he was able to see all the possible pasts and all the possible futures at every moment, which made it pretty chaotic at times. Yeah. Did you like this one, Anthony?
Oh, yeah. I like this one a lot. I like that scene that you were just speaking of, Andy, and I like the scene where he meets him in the post office, and everyone takes off their masks and everyone's freaking them alien.
I think that was Men in Black 2. I think that was
that
number
was?
2. But that's
Darn.
definitely one of my
I've seen
favorite.
them all though.
Yeah, yeah. I think of that scene often because if our channeling transcripts are to be believed, then yeah, all these people that you see around you in your daily lives really did in fact come from other planets.
Yep.
And if we could all just take off our masks and see what each other look like, it'd be so fucking hilarious. Just like that episode, I think would be great. Yeah. Let's see. Are you ready for your last question? Your third movie is one that we have already referenced earlier in this episode about a woman linguistics professor recruited by the military to figure out how to communicate with aliens that traveled back through time rather than space. I am referring to what movie?
Arrival?
Arrival. Yeah. Such a great movie. I cannot recommend it highly enough for anyone who has not seen it yet. And it's largely, I think, because of the performance of Amy Adams, who plays Louise Banks, the linguistics professor. She plays that role so beautifully. It's heartbreaking at times. I think I cried more than a few times watching this movie and watching everything that she goes through. And not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, but suffice it to say that past, present, and future all get kind of blurred together, and it's a movie about love and loss and living and free will choices that you make. Just beautifully done. Your question is, who was director Denis Villeneuve's first choice to play the role of Louise Banks in Arrival? Was it A, Zoe Saldana, B, Michelle Pfeiffer, C, Nicole Kidman, or D, Amy Adams?
Nicole Kidman, because they look alike. See.
I could picture her playing that role.
I'll just go for B, Michelle Pfeiffer. I don't know why, just guessing.
I'm going to say D, Amy Adams.
Nice. You are crushing it, Aram. Yeah. Yeah. In most movies, the person who ends up with a role was not the first person they had in mind. But sometimes it is, and in this case it was. It was his first choice, and apparently she accepted the role within 24 hours of receiving the script. Something about it resonated with her. Like I said, the way she played that role and the whole emotional range of everything she was experiencing as past, present, and future all started blurring together in weird, unpredictable ways. She just played it better than I could imagine any of those other actresses doing it. Just beautiful, heart and soul and mind.
It goes to the point of kind of keeping along one of why we have quarantine, because if aliens from other higher dimensions could just land 12 ships on our planet and start messing with our minds, and introducing circular time to us when we're not ready, they could have called before they came. They could have just sent out a video text or something to say, hey, just, but no, they just showed up and just infringed on our own free will and just said, hey, here, we're here to help you out.
Good point. Good point. They would have had to gone before the Council of Saturn to get permission for that, for sure.
Oh.
Well done. Well, folks, you've done it again. You have squandered another perfectly good 2 hours of your preciously short incarnation fucking around with the Seattle Law 1 study group. Panelists, want to thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. To all our friends at L&L Research, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to you who are watching this on video in the near or possibly very distant future. Thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. We are sending you our love light, and we are receiving yours. Until next time, in the love and light of the one infinite creator, Adonai. Namaste.